Imagine this. It is 2 in the morning. The temperature outside has dropped below freezing. The power is out. Your electric heater is useless. Your gas bill from last month is still sitting on the counter, a number so high it looked like a phone number. And somewhere in your garage, there are 3 plain terracotta flower pots and a box of ordinary candles that you bought for a dinner that never happened. What if I told you that those forgotten objects, arranged in a specific way that almost nobody talks about, can raise the temperature of a small room by several degrees? Without consuming a single watt of electricity, without a subscription, without a monthly bill, and without any technology invented after the Roman Empire. What if the most powerful emergency heating solution available to you right now costs less than $25 and fits on a table? You would probably say that sounds too simple, and that is exactly why almost nobody knows about it. Let's start where every honest conversation
about heating should start, with the problem that nobody in the heating industry wants to solve cheaply. Every winter, millions of households across North America
and Europe face the same brutal arithmetic. Electricity prices have risen an average of 15 to 20% in the last 3 years in most Western countries. In the United Kingdom, the energy price cap crisis of 2022 pushed average household energy bills above £2,500 per year, more than double what families had paid just 8 months earlier. In the United States, the average household spends between $900 and $1,400 per year on heating alone, depending on the region and the fuel source. In Germany, France, and Scandinavia, the numbers are similar or worse. Heating is not a luxury. It is a biological necessity. And yet the systems we use to achieve it are among the most expensive, most fragile, and most monopolized utilities in modern life. When the grid goes down because of a storm, a blackout, an ice event, or a simple infrastructure failure, the modern heated home becomes a liability. All that expensive, complex infrastructure becomes deadweight. And what do most emergency preparedness guides tell you to do? Buy a propane heater, buy a generator, buy more expensive equipment. The answer to a costly system failure is always another purchase, always another product, always another dependency. But there is a different story here, a quieter one that has been circulating in small preparedness communities, off-grid living forums, and survival homesteads for over a decade, and one that keeps getting dismissed, minimized, or simply ignored by the people who profit from your heating bill. It is called the terracotta radiator. And before you picture something complicated, let me describe exactly what it is. It is 2 or 3 unglazed terracotta flower pots, the kind sold at any garden center for $3 to $6 each, stacked in a nested configuration, inverted over a metal or heat-safe base, with 1 or more standard paraffin candles burning underneath. A simple bolt through the center, metal washers and nuts to hold the layered pots apart, and a stable platform to prevent fire risk. That is it. That is the entire device. The materials fit in a shopping bag and cost, in total, somewhere between $15 and $25 depending on where you buy them. No wiring, no fuel lines, no moving parts, no subscription. And the question burning in the back of your mind right now, the one that should be burning, is this: if it is that simple, why have you never heard an energy expert, a home improvement television host, or a government emergency preparedness agency recommend it? That question deserves a real answer. But first, you need to understand why it works. Because the physics behind this device are not a trick. They are not a miracle. They are a fundamental principle of thermodynamics that civilization has understood and then quietly forgotten for thousands of years. Heat moves in 3 ways. Convection, which is warm air rising and circulating. Conduction, which is heat transferring through direct contact with a material. And radiation, which is heat emitted as infrared energy directly from a warm surface, traveling through the air and warming objects and bodies without needing to heat the air itself. Most modern electric heaters, especially the cheap fan-forced variety, rely almost entirely on convection. They heat the air, and heated air, as you probably know from the painful experience, rises immediately to the ceiling. In a room with poor insulation or high ceilings, convective heat disappears almost as fast as it was produced. You are essentially paying to heat the space above your head while your feet remain cold. Radiant heat works differently. A warm surface radiates thermal energy outward. It warms what it faces, your body, your furniture, the walls nearby, rather than heating the air as an intermediary. Radiant heating is why standing in sunlight on a cold day feels warm, even when the air temperature is well below freezing. The sun is 93 million miles away, and it is still warming your face by radiation. Your electric heater, by contrast, is in the same room and your hands are still cold. Now consider what happens inside a terracotta radiator. A standard paraffin candle produces approximately 80 watts of thermal energy when burning. That number alone is not impressive. A single candle in open air releases most of that heat directly upward. In a convective column, warm air rising, dispersing immediately, doing almost nothing useful for the temperature of the room. The flame is real. The heat is real, but it is wasted. It escapes before it can do any work. When you place an unglazed terracotta pot over that flame, something changes. Unglazed terracotta, also called earthenware or fired clay, is a porous material with a specific thermal property that engineers call high thermal mass. It absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly. It does not conduct heat explosively like metal. It does not reflect it like glass. It stores it, builds up temperature gradually, and then radiates that stored heat outward as infrared energy, the same mechanism used by radiant floor heating systems that cost $15,000 to install in a home. The clay pot becomes a thermal battery. It charges with the candle's heat and discharges it as radiant warmth. When you nest 2 or 3 pots together, each one slightly larger than the last, held apart by metal washers on a central bolt, the effect compounds. The innermost pot heats first and radiates to the second. The second heats and radiates to the third. The gap between each layer acts as an insulating air channel that slows the heat loss, forcing the outermost pot to reach a higher temperature before the energy escapes. The outer surface of a properly built 2-pot terracotta radiator converters reach temperatures between 250 degrees and 300 Fahrenheit, well above the boiling point of water, while the candles underneath remain. And hobbyists who have documented this setup with thermal cameras and thermometers in controlled environments have recorded temperature increases of 3 degrees Fahrenheit to 6 degrees Fahrenheit in a 100-square-foot room over a period of 3 to 4 hours using 2 or 3 candles. That may not sound dramatic, but remember what it costs. 3 candles burning for 8 hours costs approximately 40 cents in the United States based on average retail paraffin prices. 40 cents. A typical electric space heater running for 8 hours at 1500 watts costs between $1.50 and $2.40 depending on your electricity rate. The terracotta radiator produces meaningful, measurable radiant warmth at roughly 1/6 the cost and 0 dependence on the electrical grid. This principle, dense porous ceramic, as a heat accumulator and radiator, is not a modern discovery. Not even close. The Romans built their famous hypocaust systems, underfloor radiance heating, using ceramic tiles and terracotta pipes to distribute heat from central furnaces throughout wealthy homes and public baths as early as 100 BCE.
Legionary fortresses in Roman-occupied Britain, where winter temperatures regularly fell below freezing, were heated using terracotta flue tiles embedded in walls and floors. The
Romans understood empirically and structurally that fired clay held heat in a way that no other readily available material could match. Centuries later, Korean engineers developed the ondol system, a radiant floor heating method that circulated combustion gases through channels beneath dense stone and clay floors. The first ondol was not a primitive technology. It was a sophisticated radiant heating architecture that Korean households used for over 2,000 years and that modern architects have studied as a model for passive thermal design. The material principle at its core was identical to what the terracotta radiator exploits. Dense, porous ceramic stores and redistributes heat with extraordinary efficiency. In the 1970s, during the energy independence literature emerged in the United States and Europe. Publications like the Whole Earth Catalog and early Mother Earth News documented improvised radiant heating techniques using clay, stone, and small combustion sources. The ceramic pot candle heater appeared in various forms in this literature, not as a curiosity, but as a serious emergency and supplemental heating method. It was documented, shared, tested, and then, as energy prices stabilized and consumer confidence in the grid returned through the 1980s and 1990s, largely forgotten. The knowledge did not disappear, it simply fell out of the mainstream conversation, buried under decades of appliance marketing and infrastructure dependency. And here is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because it is worth asking a direct question. Why, in an era of rising energy prices, frequent extreme weather events, and growing interest in emergency preparedness, does the terracotta radiator remain almost completely absent from mainstream home improvement media, from government emergency guides, from the recommendations of HVAC professionals, and from the sponsored content of every major home goods retailer? The answer is not a conspiracy. It is something more ordinary and, in many ways, more troubling. A bag of tea light candles costs $8 for 50. Once you have those items, you have a functional supplemental heating device indefinitely. No replacement filters, no annual service fees, no proprietary fuel cartridges, no warranty calls. The entire supply chain involved in a terracotta radiator generates, at most, a single transaction of $25. Compare that to the average HVAC system, which costs between $5,000 and $12,000 to install. Annual servicing at $100 to $200 per visit, needs filter replacements every 1 to 3 months, and locks the homeowner into a relationship with utility providers for the life of the home. The heating industry is a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem built on recurring costs and infrastructure dependency. Emergency preparedness, product lines, the generators, the propane heaters, the expensive insulated gear are another profitable sector built on the same anxiety that a terracotta
Radiator can partially address for $25. When a solution is too cheap and too self-contained to monetize, the market simply does not promote.
That is not malice. It is the invisible logic of commercial incentive, working silently to shape what you know and what you do not know. Now, I have to be honest with you here, because I believe you deserve a straight answer and not just excitement. The terracotta radiator is not a whole home heating system. It will not replace your furnace in a blizzard. In a room larger than about 150
Square feet, with poor insulation or drafty windows, the temperature gain will be minimal and potentially unnoticeable. It is a supplemental device, an emergency tool, a way to make a small space, a bedroom, a bathroom, a well-sealed office, meaningfully more bearable when your primary heating fails. Or when you simply want to reduce consumption on a brutally cold night. Used correctly, it is genuinely impressive. Used with unrealistic expectations,
it will disappoint you. And like any open flame, it requires basic fire safety discipline, never leave it unattended, always use it on a
non-flammable surface, keep it away from curtains and paper, and ensure the room has adequate ventilation to prevent carbon dioxide buildup from the candles.
That caveat offered, the practical construction of a working terracotta radiator is simpler than assembling flat-pack furniture. You need 3 unglazed terracotta pots in the graduating sizes, for example, a 4-inch pot, a 6-inch pot, and an 8-inch pot. You need a metal bolt approximately 5 inches long,
a collection of metal washers and nuts, a metal loaf pan or a baking sheet to serve as the base, and 3 to 4
standard pillar candles or a cluster of tea lights. Thread the bolt through the drainage hole of the smallest pot, secure it with a washer and nut at the top so it cannot pull through, then lower the bolt down through the next pot and secure it with another washer and nut, creating a gap of about ½ an inch between the 2 pots. Repeat with the 3rd pot. The result is a nested stack of ceramic pots held apart by small metal spacers, with the bolt hanging down as a mounting point or handle. Place,
but not directly on the flame, about 2 to 3 inches clearance is ideal. Within 20 to 30 minutes, the outer surface of
the device will be radiating noticeable warmth. Within an hour, the radiant heat output is measurable and consistent. People who have used this setup
during power outages in New England winters, in Northern European apartments during heating failures, and in off-grid cabins in Canada and Scandinavia consistently report the same experience. The device does not make a cold room feel like summer. It makes it feel survivable. It raises the temperature of a small sealed room from genuinely dangerous territory below 50 degrees to something manageable.
It's a restaurant meal and require no infrastructure at all. There is something larger here worth sitting with. We live in a moment of
extraordinary technological complexity. The systems we rely on for warmth, for light, for food, for communication, all of it runs through infrastructure chains of almost incomprehensible scale and fragility. A transformer failure, an ice storm, a cyber attack, a supply disruption, any of these events can sever
your access to the tools you depend on for basic comfort and survival. And the response that modern consumer culture has trained you toward, this is always the same: buy a more expensive backup system. Add another layer of product dependency to replace the layer that failed. Never step outside the market. Never use knowledge that cannot be monetized. But the terracotta radiator points towards something different. It points toward a tradition of, is always the same: buy a more expensive backup system. Add another layer of product dependency to replace the layer that failed. Never step outside the market. Never use knowledge that cannot be monetized. But the terracotta radiator points towards something different. It points toward a tradition of practical intelligence that predates the grid, that existed long before the energy companies, that kept human beings alive and warm in conditions far harsher
than anything most of us will ever face. It is not primitive knowledge, it is durable knowledge. It is knowledge that the Romans encoded, that page of every home improvement website, that it is not recommended by your utility company or endorsed by your HVAC contractor, is not evidence that it does not work. In many cases, absence from the commercial conversation is the most honest signal that something is genuinely useful and genuinely inexpensive. The market tells you about what it can sell you. It stays quiet about what you can build yourself for $25.
You are not helpless against the cold. You were never meant to be. The body of human knowledge about warmth, shelter, and thermal management
is vast, ancient, practical, and largely free. The terracotta radiator is one small piece of that knowledge, a piece that fits in your
hands, costs almost nothing, requires no expertise to build, and works right now, tonight, if you need it to. 3 flower pots, a bolt, and a handful of candles. That is all that stands between you and a functional radiant heating device that ancient engineers would have recognized immediately. The next time your heating bill arrives and the number makes you wince, or the next time the power goes out and the temperature starts to drop, you will remember this. Not because someone sold you something, because you learned something. And that is the kind of knowledge that no utility company, no appliance manufacturer, and no algorithm can ever take away from you. The warmth was always within reach. It was just waiting for you to stop looking in the store and start looking at what you already have.